Helen Carter was the teacher everyone trusted, but beneath her kind smile, a chilling secret was waiting to be uncovered.
Out.
What really happened behind the classroom doors? In the peaceful town of Millwood, life moved slowly and quietly. Families took pride in their close-knit community where everyone knew each other by name. At the heart of this town was Millwood Elementary School, a place filled with laughter, learning, and the cheerful voices of children. Among the teachers there, Helen Carter stood out. She was a figure of warmth and kindness, known for her dedication to her students and her ability to make every child feel special. For more than 10 years, Helen had been shaping young minds, earning the trust of parents and the admiration of her colleagues. Her classroom was always bright and inviting, decorated with colorful drawings and inspiring quotes. She was the kind of teacher who stayed late to help struggling students and who remembered birthdays and little details about each child's life. Helen's reputation was impeccable, and no one would have suspected that beneath her gentle demeanor, something unsettling might be hidden. But life, as it often does, began to reveal cracks in the perfect image she had built. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. A few students began acting differently after spending time in Helen's class. Some appeared anxious and withdrawn, no longer eager to attend school. Parents noticed changes in their children's behavior, sudden mood swings, reluctance to talk about their day, and an overwhelming need to avoid certain activities. At first, these signs were dismissed as typical childhood phases or reactions to normal school stress. Yet the worry grew as more families shared similar concerns. One parent, Lisa Moore, became especially alarmed when her son Jacob, once a bubbly and confident boy, started hiding behind his mother whenever it was time for school. He stopped sharing stories about his day and refused to participate in class activities he used to enjoy. Lisa gently tried to ask what was wrong, but Jacob simply shook his head or gave vague answers. The fear that something was wrong gnawed at Lisa, but she had no proof or clear direction on how to address it. Meanwhile, other parents exchanged uneasy glances and hushed conversations in playgrounds and at pickup lines, wondering if they were overreacting or ignoring real problems. In the midst of this growing unease, a few students began writing strange, unsettling things in their notebooks, words that didn't seem to belong in their innocent schoolwork. These notes hinted at feelings of fear, confusion, and isolation, though they didn't reveal much else. School officials were caught between the desire to protect their staff and the need to ensure student safety. The principal, known for her firm but fair leadership, decided to keep a close eye on the situation while avoiding alarming the community unnecessarily. The tension simmered just beneath the surface, invisible to most but potent enough to disturb those paying attention. Helen Carter continued her teaching, appearing as composed and caring as ever. But the whispers about her began to spread quietly. No one wanted to believe that a trusted teacher could be the cause of their children's distress, yet the signs could no longer be ignored. The question that lingered in the minds of parents and teachers alike was this: was Helen Carter really the nurturing educator they thought she was? Or was there something more sinister lurking behind her smile? This question set the stage for an investigation that would shake the town of Millwood to its core and unravel a web of secrets no one saw coming. The tension in Millwood Elementary grew steadily as concerned parents and school staff tried to piece together what was really happening in Mrs. Carter's classroom. The strange notes found in students' notebooks were the first clear sign that something was deeply wrong. These notes were short, cryptic messages filled with words like scared, alone, and don't tell. Though the meanings were unclear, they spoke volumes to those who read them. The school counselor, Mrs. Jennings, was among the first adults to recognize that these were not normal expressions from children. She began carefully observing the students who had written the notes, searching for clues in their behavior. Despite her best efforts, Mrs. Jennings found the children hesitant to talk openly. Many seemed frightened or confused, and some avoided eye contact altogether. Their reactions were subtle, but troubling. Some flinched when Helen entered the room. Others found excuses to stay close to friends or leave class early. At the same time, the school's administration was wary of acting too quickly. Helen Carter had built a strong reputation, and without solid proof, accusing her of any wrongdoing felt risky. After all, a teacher's career and reputation were on the line, and false accusations could cause irreversible damage. To gather more evidence, the school discreetly installed security cameras in the classrooms, aiming to monitor interactions without disrupting the learning environment. However, the footage failed to reveal any clear incidents. Helen was seen teaching, helping students with their work, and managing the classroom as she always had. The cameras captured none of the tension that seemed to haunt her students, which only deepened the mystery. Why were the children so afraid when nothing suspicious appeared on video? Meanwhile, another strange pattern emerged. Several students began asking to use the restroom more frequently during Helen's lessons. At first, this was dismissed as a coincidence or a common childhood habit. But the school nurse noticed the timing seemed too precise, and some students who left class would not immediately return. The subtle behaviors hinted at something more than nerves or normal school anxiety, yet no one could pinpoint the cause. The real breakthrough came when a student's phone was accidentally confiscated during a routine check. The device contained a series of unusual messages sent between classmates. These messages hinted at a troubling situation. There were references to secret meetings, whispered warnings, and coded language that suggested the children were trying to protect themselves or warn each other. Although the messages didn't explicitly name Helen Carter, they pointed to an adult figure whose behavior made the students uneasy. The school handed the evidence over to local authorities, who began a careful investigation. Even as the investigation started, Helen remained outwardly calm and professional, continuing her daily routines as if nothing were wrong. Parents were divided. Some defended her, unwilling to believe the allegations, while others felt their fears were finally being taken seriously. The once peaceful atmosphere at Millwood Elementary became charged with uncertainty and suspicion. Despite mounting concerns, the investigation faced many challenges. Children were afraid to testify, unsure of what consequences might follow if they spoke out. Helen's supporters argued that the accusations were based on misunderstandings and rumors. The authorities found themselves caught between the need to protect the students and the challenge of proving anything without clear, undeniable evidence. The question hanging in the air was whether the truth about Helen Carter's classroom would ever come to light, or if the silence and fear would continue to hide the darker secrets beneath the school's cheerful walls. Months passed since the initial concerns about Helen Carter had surfaced, yet no clear answers emerged. The school's investigation seemed to stall, frustrating worried parents and staff alike. Then, unexpectedly, an anonymous tip arrived at the local police station, shaking the case wide open. The caller claimed to have witnessed suspicious behavior months earlier, a strange incident involving a locked classroom. After school hours and unexplained noises heard by the janitorial staff, the details were vague, but the tip was serious enough to prompt the police to get involved officially. Authorities quickly obtained a warrant to search Helen's classroom and her personal belongings. While the school's security cameras had shown nothing unusual, the search uncovered something else. Hidden away in a forgotten corner of Helena's home was a collection of old diaries. These diaries, worn and carefully hidden under loose floorboards, contained chilling entries. The writings revealed a darker side of Helen's personality, filled with obsessive thoughts about control, secrecy, and manipulation. She wrote about the need to maintain power over others, describing feelings of satisfaction when breaking someone's will. However, the diaries did not mention specific students or incidents, leaving investigators with disturbing clues, but no direct evidence of abuse. Helen was called in for questioning and subjected to a polygraph test. Despite the suspicious diaries and mounting concerns, she passed the test without a single indication of deception. Her calm demeanor and carefully chosen words convinced many that there was no concrete proof of wrongdoing. Frustration grew among the police and community as the investigation seemed to hit a dead end. How could a teacher with such troubling writings maintain such a polished public image? Just when hope for resolution seemed lost, a local investigative reporter named David Reynolds stepped in. Known for digging deep into cold cases, David began looking into Helen's background. He discovered a file from a previous school where Helen had worked years ago, an incident that's been quietly swept under the rug. The file contained reports of strange student transfers and anonymous complaints that were never fully investigated. Those earlier allegations hinted at troubling patterns, but Helen had moved on without facing any charges. David's findings reignited public interest and pushed authorities to revisit Helen's past. Journalists uncovered more records of unexplained events, such as students suddenly leaving the school or withdrawing from classes after time spent with Helen. Former teachers and staff, initially reluctant to speak, slowly began to share stories of unusual behavior and whispered rumors about Helen's strict and sometimes cruel methods. One former colleague described how Helen demanded absolute obedience and used subtle intimidation to keep students in line. Though no formal complaints had been made at the time, these accounts painted a troubling picture. As the past and present merged, the community realized Helen's story was far more complex than anyone had imagined. The diaries, the anonymous tip, and the reporter's investigation combined to expose a web of secrets stretching back years. Helen Carter was no longer just the friendly teacher everyone thought they knew. She was someone with a history of hidden darkness, waiting to be uncovered. The pressure mounted on the police to take action, but the question remained: how deep did Helen's deception run, and how many had suffered in silence? The next steps of the investigation would soon reveal the chilling truth behind the trusted, teacher's carefully crafted mask. With the renewed investigation underway, police began digging deeper into Helen Carter's past, uncovering layers of unsettling history that had long been buried. The old file from her previous school was just the tip of the iceberg. As officers re-interviewed former colleagues, parents, and students, a pattern of suspicious incidents emerged, incidents that had never been properly investigated or reported at the time. Several former students recalled feeling uncomfortable around Helen, describing a strict and controlling atmosphere that went beyond typical discipline. Some remembered mysterious punishments that seemed cruel and unfair, but no one had dared to speak out openly. One former student's diary surfaced during the investigation, written years after leaving Helen's class. The entries detailed a series of secret punishments that Helen had inflicted, such as forcing students to stay in locked rooms for long periods, or assigning impossible tasks as a way to humiliate and control them. The diary described a feeling of fear that overshadowed the students' entire school experience. Though this account was written years later, it painted a chilling picture of Helen's methods and suggested that the behavior might have been part of a long-term pattern. Further complicating the case was the discovery that Helen had been living a double life. Under a different name, she had been involved in an online group with connections to shadowy activities related to exploiting educators and vulnerable individuals. This hidden identity was uncovered by tech experts working with the police, who traced Helen's digital footprint across various platforms. The online group was known for manipulating and controlling people through psychological abuse and secret rituals. Helen's involvement shocked the community, raising questions about how much of her life had been a carefully constructed deception. The police began to suspect that Helen's behavior in the classroom was only a small part of a larger, darker network. They explored whether the online group had influenced her actions or even encouraged harmful behavior toward students. This revelation added new urgency to the investigation and led to coordination with cybercrime units and child protection agencies. The town of Millwood, once proud of its close community, now faced the unsettling reality that something sinister had been hiding in plain sight for years. As the investigation deepened, authorities planned a sting operation. Undercover officers posed as concerned parents seeking to uncover the truth for themselves. Through secret meetings and carefully staged encounters, Helen began to reveal her true nature, dropping the carefully maintained mask she wore in public. The officers gathered evidence of her manipulation tactics, secret punishments, and psychological control over children. The trap was set to catch her in the act, providing the solid proof that had eluded investigators for so long. Helen's arrest sent shockwaves through Millwood. The trusted teacher, once admired and respected, was now exposed as a predator who had exploited her position of power for years. Parents struggled to come to terms with the betrayal, and the school faced intense scrutiny for failing to act sooner. The community demanded answers about how such a person had been allowed to teach and how many children had suffered in silence. Helen's trial promised to reveal even more dark details, and the town braced itself for the fallout from one of the most disturbing scandals in its history. The story was far from over. But one thing was clear: Helen Carter's carefully built life was unraveling, and the truth was finally coming to light. Helen Carter's arrest marked the beginning of a tumultuous chapter for the town of Millwood. The shock of betrayal ran deep. How could someone so trusted, so beloved, be capable of such manipulation and cruelty? The trial that followed gripped the community's attention, revealing layers of deception and abuse that left many speechless. Prosecutors presented evidence gathered from undercover operations, digital records, and the testimonies of former students and colleagues. The psychological damage Helen inflicted became painfully clear through their words, stories of fear, isolation, and emotional torment that had been hidden behind the walls of a cheerful classroom. As the courtroom drama unfolded, Helen maintained a composed exterior, denying physical abuse but admitting to exerting strict control over her students. She framed her behavior as discipline and order, a necessary part of teaching. But the evidence told a different story, one of manipulation and fear used to dominate vulnerable children. The diaries found in her home, once dismissed as mere writings, were introduced as windows into her mindset. The entries painted a picture of a woman obsessed with power, willing to break spirits to maintain control. Experts in psychology testified about the long-lasting effects of such abuse, explaining how trauma in childhood could shape a person's entire life. The revelations during the trial sparked outrage and grief in Millwood. Parents questioned the school's role and why warning signs had been ignored for so long. Teachers and administrators faced intense scrutiny, with many admitting to discomfort but choosing silence over confrontation. The school board launched a full review of its policies, promising reforms to protect students and ensure transparency in the future. The community organized support groups for victims and families, seeking healing amid the pain. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Helaine's defense tried to argue that she was a victim herself, troubled by past experiences and misunderstood by those around her. They portrayed her as a strict but caring teacher whose actions were exaggerated and misinterpreted. However, the jury was not convinced. After weeks of testimony and emotional accounts, Helen Carter was found guilty of psychological abuse and misconduct. The sentencing reflected the seriousness of her crimes, emphasizing the need to protect children from such abuse. The case left lasting scars on Millwood, but it also sparked change. Schools across the region reevaluated their oversight procedures, placing greater emphasis on student welfare and anonymous reporting systems. Parents became more vigilant, determined not to let another child suffer in silence. Helen's story served as a harsh reminder that appearances could be deceiving, and that sometimes danger lurked behind the most familiar faces. In the years that followed, Millwood slowly began to heal. The students affected by Helen's abuse received counseling and support, their bravery in coming forward helping others find their voices. The town learned the painful lesson that trust must be earned and guarded, especially when it comes to those entrusted with caring for children. Helen Carter's fall from grace was a cautionary tale, a warning of how power can be abused and how silence can enable harm. Though the wounds would never fully disappear, Millwood vowed to remain vigilant, assuring that no other teacher would ever hide behind a mask of kindness while hiding a darker truth.